Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's amazing to have the opportunity to be presenting this alongside Marc-André. Super proud and happy, actually, to be on stage. All right. So, Beyond Gaming is with myself, historian at Ubisoft for the last 8 years, so helping the team to develop the video games that become Assassin's Creed. And I'm joined by Marc-André Éthier, who's a full professor of history didactic at the University of Montreal, which is about 2 kilometers away from the studio of Ubisoft in Montreal. So it's a nice proximity, and is also my university. All right, so what I want to talk about today is the creation of the Discovery Tour by Assassin's Creed. So I want to bring you to talking a little bit about the kind of games that we make at Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed itself. So let me start quickly by introducing you the different time periods that we've been talking about in the last 11 years. So we've been dealing with the Third Crusades, the Italian Renaissance, the colonial history in the Caribbean. We've been talking about Imperial China, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and in 2017, we released the last game, which was about Ptolemaic Egypt, so Egypt at the time of Queen Cleopatra. So with these time periods, what we're doing at Assassin's Creed is actually creating an environment, a game for fun. This is our mission. This is what we do. We create entertainment. This being said, we define that creating entertainment can be done seriously in a way. So when we create these games, we do a lot of research. It's everyone in the team actually doing research, reading biographies, looking for encyclopedia articles, looking at movies, the entertainment products, TV series. So really everyone in the team, I mean, we have hundreds of people working on projects like Assassin's Creed. Everyone is interested in learning things that will make their job easier. So artists want to know what the environment looks like. Designers want to know what are the elements of history that will inspire them to create scenarios, create game systems. So it's really everyone. Within the team, obviously, there's me as a historian. We also work on every project with different historians. On the last game, on Assassin's Creed Origins, we had Egyptologists working with us. We had specialists also in ancient Greek languages working with us to help recreate the languages in the game. So every time we try to work mostly with professors, with people, experts in their field of research. And these are helping us to create credibility. We are not aiming at 100% historical accuracy. If you know, if you're a historian or interested in that subject, it's an unattainable possibility, but we're not trying to do that. We're trying to get inspired by history to create a fun game. This being said, we can work with communities also. So during the game that was launched about the American Revolution, our main hero was a Mohawk British character. So we work hand in hand with one of the local communities in Montreal, which is Mohawk. So it was really important for us to get their feedback, which is not a historian feedback, but really a more local and sensitive feedback. We work with weapons experts. When possible, we work with history fans also because they provide something very visual for the team. So here you have some videos of when we visited the Battle of Lexington and Concord towards Boston. So when we were doing that game, it was interesting to bring the team to see these battles, to smell the feeling of these moments. So these are really, truly inspiring for us as a team. Here's just a quick example of recreating the old State House that was back in 2012 on Assassin's Creed 3. And so you have some of the different aspects of how we model it, how we texture it, and a comparison with the actual State House in Boston, which holds a museum. And so the reason why I'm showing you this example is that was one very good moment where we tried to reproduce something faithfully as much as possible on the state of that building at the time period of the American Revolution. And so we got the director of the museum back then just told us how he was happy about the result of that monument. So, and then you can always compare it with other sources from after the American Revolution. What we create at Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed are also emotions. So here, when you look at the tourist picture, you see that the proportions are realistic. And when you look at the painting, you see that the proportions are obviously not realistic, but they convey a feeling. And with Assassin's Creed, we play with these together. We play with the proportions. We create an emotion playing with the weather, for instance. And this is what is engaging players into what we're doing. Normally, I would ask for you to raise your hand and define which is reality and which is the game one. Let's skip that because of time constraints, but just to help you, on the left side is the real Sainte-Chapelle in Paris. And you can see the difference is that the glass work on the right side is generic. It's made by a computer. And there's also one space on the top where the assassin can climb. So you wouldn't have that in real life. Very quickly, here's an explanation of how we created the map for our latest game, Assassin's Creed Origins. So we are looking at the different areas, in this case in Egypt, but also in Libya, that were interesting for us in terms of history. And then what we did is we actually zoomed in all of these different locations, looked at the city, at the toponymy, and we actually created a new map that made more sense for the players. So we removed the distances. We played with that a lot because we wanted to show these places, but obviously in the game, you don't want to travel for weeks in the deserts. You can travel for hours, that's quite all right, or you can fast travel. So that's how we create a game, the map, for instance, where you can see that you can go to Alexandria, to Cyrene, which is normally in Libya, super far away. But at the time of Cleopatra, it's a Greek colony that has a lot of links with Egypt. So we study the topology, for instance. We want to make sure that there's a lot of diversity for players. We look at the environment, more on the environment, try to create a lot of diversity, again, for players so they can locate themselves into the maps. They know where, if they are in an oasis, they know where they are at. If they are in a desert, they know exactly where they are at because they can relate to something, either a mountain that is unique or another piece of landmark. And so this is how we create a map for Assassin's Creed Origins, for instance. All right, that leads me to talk about some more examples here of how we created maps of our previous games. Maybe I'll skip over that very quickly. I'm sorry. So talking about the fact that we wanted to share more when we create these games. We realized that fans like history. They like to play with history, even if it's not, we're not creating a documentary, we're playing a game for fun. Here we got some examples of how we create the crowd life, for instance. So we can use votive models. And people, even though they're killing someone or riding their horse and living their adventure, they'll be in contact with the crowd that is in the back, that is living its life. And so we thought, maybe we should do more with that. Maybe we should share more with our fans, with the players, and with other people. So the idea of creating the Discovery Tour was really to give more information. Back in 2009, we started introducing the Animus database, which was an in-game encyclopedia, giving you some facts about characters, about landmarks, about some crowd life stations that we had in the game. These were very limited, and they were driven by the narrative of the game. So it was seamless experience, but very short. With the Discovery Tour, what we wanted to do was to make people learn about ancient Egypt. Our goal was really to make it accessible for a bigger audience. So we wanted to please our fans, which are millions of people, but we also wanted to be more accessible, let's say, for museums, for classrooms, for anyone that would be interested in learning about ancient Egypt, discovering mostly ancient Egypt. So all of this was driving us in the way that we would design the Discovery Tour. Our goal was really to allow everyone to go into that map, explore it, and freely, without no time constraint, without no pressure of fight or narrative. And also, we wanted to talk a little bit about how we make these games, how we make these choices. Obviously, the example that I showed you about the map is not something that would be explained normally when you play Assassin's Creed. But in a place like the Discovery Tour, maybe that's more appropriate to talk about that. So very, very briefly, I'll talk about the process of how we created this. So many years ago, we started the idea of let's create the Animus Database 2.0. Let's create that new tool that we want that we dream of. So we went into educational conferences. Funny thing is, I was in New York 3 years ago at Games for Learning, talking about Assassin's Creed. I couldn't talk about the Discovery Tour yet, but this is what we had in mind. So I went to a lot of different conferences, listening, trying to understand what different types of people wanted, what historians want, what teachers want. I understood very quickly that every country is different, every state is different, and we have a product that is worldwide, so that was very problematic, let's say at the least. Then we looked at what we had in Assassin's Creed Origins. We designed the content, so we knew we had pyramids, we had Alexandria, we had many different topics that we could talk about. We asked Egyptologists, historians to write the scientific texts. We asked them to write something very lengthy, so we could narrow it down, make it sexier, shorter also, because we wanted these tours to be accessible. So a tour that would be too long wouldn't make sense because people wouldn't carry on with their experience. And so once we had these texts, we actually used the controller, went into the 3D world, and tried to create these tours. That didn't go super well. We realized that the tours would last for about 2 hours and a half. So imagine after 2 hours and a half, you've learned about pottery. It's very exciting. Maybe you don't want to carry on and go for the pyramids, because maybe 20 hours later, you'll learn that. Maybe it's more interesting to go to a university course to do that. So we went back into the design table, asking ourselves what were the things that we were giving ourselves as a goal. So we knew that we wanted to achieve 5 minutes as an average for the tours, so that it would make sense in a classroom, for instance. So we readapted, we cut, we trimmed a lot. Instead of having about 20 tours, we went into 75 tours. We couldn't keep some of the tours that we wanted. That was life. But we made sure that what we had would be very interesting as much as possible. Then we choose the additional images. So we have over 700 images that were sourced from museums and libraries worldwide. We give the reference also. Obviously, we could have hundreds of thousands of images to explain how we create a world like ancient Egypt, but we have to choose. And then there's the complexity of having to actually get these and get the rights to use these, because we're not a non-profit organization. So things like that, we learned a lot through the process. Then we polished the experience, we debugged it. We had a team of about 35 people working on a discovery tour. They were all volunteers that had created Assassin's Creed Origins previously, and super motivated. They've created tools, systems that we have that were not existing in Assassin's Creed Origins before, and they created that without so many resources. So that was a very, very great experience. So in the process, there was something that was very unexpected and important, however, and I'll let Marc-André now explain that to you guys.
Merci. Well, first of all, I have to say that I was trained as an historian, and that I did teach history for a few years in high school before I was hired in the University of Montreal. And I have no personal interest whatsoever in video games. I am a very traditional academic in education. I usually do content analysis of history textbooks for high school. So, in the last few years, I visited many classrooms around Quebec, our state, for extended time, and I noticed that video games are more and more present, increasingly present, of course, at home, because students play extensively, learn things with that media, and then ask questions to their teachers in class about what they learned, false, right? Is it true or no? Things like that. So more of those teachers are planning their lessons, preparing their lesson, taking into account that new interest for historical video games. This is why I decided to interview historians who were involved in the video game industry. And since Ubisoft has appointed many historians, I contacted the company and met Maxime, who facilitated the interviews. Then, when the Discovery Tour was ready, Maxime told me about it, and I proposed to make a study on it. So it was kind of haphazard, and the company accepted my proposal. So I designed a quasi-experimental study that aimed to compare what students can learn with the Discovery Tour on one hand, to what they can learn with a more traditional lecture on the other hand. Ubisoft let me work freely in both senses. I mean, I was not paid, but that's okay. Well, I have salary, that's okay, from my university. But also, they didn't ask me anything, no question about nothing. I designed and realized my research without any interference from them, so it was very ideal as a situation. They even agreed not to have access to the results before I made them public, which is kind of rare in that kind of entente. Relation, yeah, thank you. Nevertheless, they lent the hardware, they lent the software, and the workforce I needed to move and install everything in many schools. We went from school to school, 9 schools, as we can see here. They even accepted to rush to prepare a French version of the tour, which was necessary because, as you might have noticed, we speak French, and my accent is kind of a proof of that. So they made a translation that was very helpful. My team and I recruited 321 students in 9 secondary schools, including 8 charter schools. Charter schools, well, this is a bit of overrepresentation of charter schools, but it was, well, that happened because it went faster to get through the red tape with them. So we had very few time, and we decided to go ahead with them. Students were recruited on age and voluntary basis. We wanted to have 60% of our sample in grade 1, which is 12, 13 years old, because they study antiquity in grade 1 in our state. So we wanted also to have older students to make comparison, to see if age made a statistical difference, and it doesn't make no difference, statistically no difference, no important difference. In every particular school, there was a student of the same age. We wanted to have more girls in our samples, but well, there were only, as you can see, as you did see, 28% of them, 70% of boys. Now you have footage of what we did in one of those schools. That's a private charter school, where we did the experiment. And then I will tell you more about the research design, very simple research design that I made for this research. In fact, yeah, in each school, we began with a pre-test to assess how much students know about the subject, knew about the subject. There were 40 students in each school. Then we divided them randomly into 2 equal groups of 20 students. The control group had the teacher, always the same one in each school. They gave them a lecture on Ptolemaic Egypt, 12-minute lecture, very short one, with a focus on Alexandria Library. Then students had a post-test. And then I have to say that the pre-test and the post-test included 8, well, some identical questions on declarative factual knowledge pertaining to the lecture. So there were some other demographic questions that we asked also, but only once. Then treatment group has 12 minutes of autonomous visit at the same time on the same content, and they did the same post-test also. So the results now, they were fascinating results, in fact, that we got. The first important result is that everybody learned something. Students with the teacher learned more, with their mean score going from 22% to 51%, while scores of the Discovery Tour student went from 21 to 44%. So both learned something. We observed that those who finished fast visited other locations on the map, that they were interested in architecture, on many things, in fact. But we also interviewed students, and they pointed to the fact that they enjoyed doing what we did. They learned with both modes, but it was easier to discriminate, to understand what is important with the guidance from one teacher. And they also insisted, and that was kind of fun, that if they were to decide, they would rather play the real game instead of doing the discovery mode. But they were not old enough. One of the boys, in fact, told his teacher that it was the best day in his life. Yeah, that was cute. Of course, he was 12 years old. That older, that would be less cute, I guess. Anyway, so the study has some limits too, and I will. There is numerous limits, but I will limit myself to 2 limits. The first one, we ask easy questions. In fact, they are not easy questions. Not that easy, since many people don't know, for example, any Greek poet from the 3rd century. But these are questions that we can categorize as low-order knowledge in Bloom taxonomy, for example, because they were concrete, factual knowledge that they had to recall, what we often call also declarative knowledge, like names, dates, things like that. History teaching is far, or should be, far more ambitious than that. We want students to be motivated to study history. We want them to use concepts to understand the world, to assess value and signification of historical evidence, to solve problems, to posit and solve problems. In some, we want them to become critical citizens, if they will, and to equip them with mental tools that will help them to deliberate, debate about interpretations, be they political or historical, including discourses using the past to chart the future. So we want them to do that in history classes. We were not looking at that with this test. It is as eminently important to do so as incredibly difficult to test and measure that kind of learning. So next time we will do that, but with the schedule we had, it was impossible. Second limit, we only add 15 minutes between the pre-test and the post-test. So we have no idea how well the student would remember the info 6 months later. Both groups were equal with that, but we don't know if they still remember things. We know that they learned something when it happened, and then we don't know. So we have to continue our research. We need to see what other factors are influencing students' reaction. We'd like also to compare, for example, different portions of the tour, or any other tour that would eventually, I hope, be made. For example, we can make the hypothesis that a tour on mummification would be more effective than a lecture, owing to the fact that mummification is a complex and visual practice that should be more interesting to work with that than with a normal lecture. But we don't know. We had to test that. We would also like to work on quests where students would have, in fact, to use historical methodology and concept to solve problems, because we think that quests are very powerful learning incentive. So many things that we can do. Finally, one that we would like to do too is to see what happens with the hybrid mode when the teacher or where the teacher is guiding the students, and to document what formation is needed to do that efficiently. So that is the way forward for my research, in fact, what I would like to do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marc-André.
Merci.
Now.
Oui. Absolument.
All right, I've kept you waiting long enough. Let's do a little demo of the Discovery Tour. So this has been launched at the end of last February. So when you open the game, this is what it's like. It was given freely for owners of Assassin's Creed Origins. It was an automatic update. We actually forced it, and so they couldn't say no. But we also have a standalone version that is available on PC. Realistically, right now, the PC version asks for very high PC prerequisites. So that is one of the things that we hope we can solve in the future. So far, you'll see that the good thing with the good PC specs are the graphics. The bad thing is that school PCs have a hard time running them. All right, so we're in front of the Library of Alexandria. Welcome to ancient Egypt. Here we have one character. If we want, we can open the menu. Let's say we want to play as, let's be Julius Caesar. All right, let's be Julius Caesar. And then this is a tour that was actually studied during the test with Marc-André. So students would do exactly what I'm doing right now. They would get to the tour starter. They see what is the objective, what is the estimated time. Again, there's no time pressure, but it just gives you an idea.
Welcome to the Great Library of Alexandria.
So the way that we designed it is that these are audio-guided tours. There are 75 of them. The way that you do them is simply to follow the line on the ground. But again, you can go wherever you want. If you prefer to climb this wall, sure. Why not? It's Julius Caesar, after all.
Near the district of royal palaces and within the Moseon was the most famous library of all antiquity. The Library of Alexandria was built to house all of human knowledge. At its pinnacle, the library was believed to contain over 700,000 parchments.
So every time you get to a station, there's a narrator that will talk about something very interesting, hopefully. You can see the text. If you can zoom in the image, you can hide the text. Usually you would have the reference on top. In this case, it's a water painting that was done by Jean-Claude Golvin. He's a very famous scientist, has many titles, architect, archaeologist. He spent most of his life in ancient Egypt. And he's, in addition to his scientific knowledge, he's also a very good interpreter of archaeology reports using water paintings. So we partnered with him, and we're super proud to have more than 40 of his work in the Discovery Tour. 20 of them are exclusive that were made for Ubisoft for the creation of Assassin's Creed Origins. So you get from one station to another. Some of these stations are called behind the scenes, like this one.
Throughout the centuries, fires and
where
wars
we try to
between
explain a little bit more about the way that we
destroyed the
create
library,
this
leaving
game, the way
nothing
that we
behind.
interpret also history facts.
The loss of the building,
Obviously,
and more
history
importantly,
is full
its vast
of
collection
holes. It's
is
like a
immeasurable.
puzzle box, and you only have
As no
5
descriptions
pieces,
are
and
available,
it's a
the
2,000
team's
piece
rendition of
puzzle.
the Library of
So we have
Alexandria
to
was
be
inspired
very
by the visuals of
inspired
the
to
Library
create
of
the
Celsus at
rest, to
Ephesus.
make this believable, to make this universe believable. So in this case, for instance, it's just a comparison with the Library of Celsus in Ephesus. And so it's, you can really go everywhere that you want with your character. If you get into a place like the Library of Alexandria, if you want, I'll just close this
While
one.
much of the collection
You can
was
try to
purchased
see
at
if you
government's
can
expense,
still maybe
the
want
library
someone's
also
job.
obtained
So
books through
there's
other
a white
means.
spot on the ground here.
Any books
Maybe
owned
let's
by
get Julius
travelers
Caesar to
coming
write
the
some
city were
papyrus.
seized.
So
The
we
copy
actually act our own game
copy
and
would then be
enabled all the
returned
cloud
to the owner,
stations
and the
to be
original
playable
entered
by the
into the
characters.
library's
So it's
collection.
not put forward when you get into the Discovery Tour, but it's accessible. So if you want to make bread, for instance, you can do that in the Discovery Tour. So you can see something, you can also zoom in. Artists didn't really appreciate that we did that, but we thought it was more interesting to be able to show you what is on screen. So you follow these paths simply getting from one station to another. You can engage into these tours by either choosing them by topic, so Egypt, pyramids, Alexandria, the daily life, or the Roman prisons. If, let's say you want to revisit something that you've read, but you don't want to engage in the tour, you can use it browsing the encyclopedia map. You can zoom in or out. All of these blue icons are the icons of tour starters. So you can see that there's a lot of them in Alexandria. You can go in the west in Cyrene, down south into the oasis of Siwa, or in the Fayoum. Along the Nile, you can go back up to Memphis. So you can really go actually everywhere. You can fast travel to these places, so there's no time constraint, there's no time wasted. As I said, you have all of these characters that you can play with. Let's say I want to be Shadia here, so I can go around. I can be that little girl, that little Egyptian girl. If she's well-mannered, she didn't run inside the library, if you noticed. Otherwise, you can use Senu, the eagle. That was very useful in the main game, but here it also allows you to visit the whole place. So you can go from one side of the map to the other. It won't ever stop you. Even though I'm engaged in a tour right now, maybe at some point it will tell me, hey, you're going away from the tour. Are you sure you want to do that? I'll just ignore it and continue. So this is possible. The further you go away, the longest you have to load, a couple seconds to get back to your character. There's this passport page that allows you to see your progression. You can always reset your state of advancement into all of these tours. So let's say you have a classroom, you have one computer to run the whole thing. And so afterwards, you want to see if the student has played a tour. Well, you can see if the tour has been completed or is in progress. And if the tour has been completed, you can reset it to uncompleted if you want to reuse it. So there's this whole game, which is not really a game, it's more an educational tool, or discovery tool, is fully replayable. So you have a little timeline here, you have the control maps. So there are many more things that I wish I could say about the discovery tour, but I think now it's out there. It's our first time we do this, it's not perfect, but hopefully we'll have feedback and we'll see teachers using it, and tell us more about the way they use it, and so we can learn about that and make it better maybe in the future. Thank you so much for your attention. This is all for today.